Well, this is interesting because this could, in effect, basically render Obamacare null and void. Now, before I get too excited, I have to remind myself that the people who will be telling us if this lawsuit goes through and wins, meaning it has to be ruled on, are those same judges out there who were appointed by the executive branch or the president himself. And this law is the president's law, basically. So I'm going to wish everybody good luck. But there's a lawsuit known as Sissel versus HHS, which is the Department of Health and Human Services. And Sissel is spelled S-I-S-S-E-L. And they're saying that Obamacare imposes a charge on Americans who fail to buy insurance, health insurance, a charge that the U.S. Supreme Court recently characterized as a federal tax, which they did. So this lawsuit has an amended complaint after that ruling took place that it is a tax, and it is stating that plain text right in the Constitution states that any revenue generating bill must originate in the House of Representatives, not the Senate. Any revenue generating bill must originate in the House. And this was not originated in the House. This did not originate in the House. So when the judge declared it's a tax, it's constitutional, and everyone said, ha ha ha, we told you so. We told all you people who said it wasn't a tax, it is a tax, and the Supreme Court just said it's a tax. The problem is, a couple problems really. First problem is, how can you only tax a citizen if they do not purchase a product? Taxes have to be fair to everybody. They have to be across the board. What is that? Like a direct and indirect tax or whatever? Or direct and proportionate tax? That on itself, to me, seems unconstitutional. But that's not even what this lawsuit is about. They're going after this on a perfectly legit standpoint where they can't really, the government cannot argue any kind of case whatsoever to say, well, it's constitutional because that's why he's going after it this way, which is great. Matter of fact, because it has been declared a tax, that means it is a revenue generating bill, or was, which is now law, which means it had to have started in the House and it didn't. Therefore, violating that clause of the Constitution where it should have originated in the House and did not means the whole thing's null and void. And it states in the Constitution, all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. They did not propose or concur. This thing started in the Senate. Senate Democrats played a shell game in an attempt to satisfy the origination clause while passing Obamacare. The House of Representatives had unanimously, 416-0, passed H.R. 3590, which was a 714-word bill granting tax credits to veterans. So the House passed H.R. 3590, which would have lowered taxes on veterans, thereby reducing revenue for the federal government. In fall 2009, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid took H.R. 3590 and stripped out every word of this veteran tax credit bill and replaced it with 379,976 words of Obamacare. This was the bill that ultimately passed Congress and was signed by President Obama. And they said the 5 justices, again, 5-4 ruling always. maybe we'll get him next time. 5-4 ruling, as you would expect, said that in the original NFIB versus REALIST, that Obamacare's individual mandate is a tax, which we just discussed. The original House-passed version of H.R. 3590 was not a revenue-raising bill, because all that was gutted out and replaced with the current form of Obamacare. Thus, regardless of how the Senate amended it, it was and never could have been a bill to raise revenue that originated in the House of Representatives. Under the plain text of the Constitution, Obamacare had to originate in the House of Representatives. It did not, and is therefore unconstitutional. Plain and simple. It's that simple. You can look at all the fine details and this and that, but the bottom line is, as this guy is saying in this lawsuit, this amended complaint, it had to originate in the House because it was, in fact, as we now know, since the Supreme Court has ruled it being a tax, means it was a revenue-generating bill, which means it had to have originated in the House. And it kind of did in the beginning, because whatever H.R. 3950, whatever the hell that one was, that's the one that originated in the House. But there was no language of Obamacare, really, and taxing, that kind of thing, in it. So they, again, Harry Reid gutted it in the Senate, replaced all of it, and then they passed that. That is not an amendment, which says that they could concur, as I said, with an amendment or such. That was not. That was a completely different bill, basically. So I'm going to be very interested to see where this goes. Very interested, because I remember exactly where I was when the Supreme Court ruled that it was a tax. I was actually in my boss's truck, leaving Florida, heading to Tennessee, trying to figure out where we were looking for property and that whole thing. That was, that was, in other words, that was a while back. Before I went to Tennessee and moved, obviously, and moved back. But I remember specifically, and we were on the interstate, and we had some talk show radio thing on that was local to that area, and inside, we were definitely in Tennessee, and the couple guys on the talk show were, talking about how, oh my God, the Supreme Court has just ruled, Obamacare's a tax. Everybody was kind of flipping out, yelling and hyped up on the, the radio, and sure enough, me and my boss looking at each other like, yep, figures. So it's interesting that I remember exactly where I was when that happened, because it's not like a huge event just took place, really. It wasn't like, JFK, where were you when JFK got assassinated? Everybody that was alive knows where they were on that. Same with 9/11. I know exactly where I was and exactly what I was doing when that happened. Now, George Bush Sr., when asked where he was during the assassination of President Kennedy, he replied, I don't remember. Don't quite remember. Keeping in mind, if you look at the photos of the book repository when that happened, you will see little George Bush Sr. back then standing in front of it, kind of posing for a picture right in front of the book repository. So anyways, it's funny to me though that this Obamacare is not on the scale of the JFK assassination. It is certainly not on the scale of 9/11. And yet I know, to me, it was something that's like embedded in my brain. I knew exactly where I was, what I was doing when I found the news that, Obamacare was nonsense and it was a tax. But the judge ruled, look, strictly by the law, 5-4 ruling, of course, this is a tax. It is a tax. So since he ruled that way, it's kind of like playing chess. They just moved their piece over here, right? Their queen, and ruled. oh, it's a tax, sorry about your luck. And when, in doing so, they didn't realize that they moved their chess piece, the queen, which they thought was a good move, because now they've just about got our king in checkmate, and didn't see our rook sitting right over there, smiling at the queen, saying, hey, you's about to get it. And that's that moment right now, when this amended complaint in the lawsuit states, now that the Supreme Court has ruled it's a tax, that means it was a revenue generating bill to begin with. Had to have been, because you've ruled it a tax. It didn't just come out of nowhere later on. It was ruled on in its entirety when it was created. You know, the wording, the bill, the law didn't change. Therefore, it had to have started in the House and did not. And since it did not, it violates that section of the Constitution, which means the entire Obamacare bill is null and void. I gotta say, I don't have much faith in the system because, again, the president and prior presidents get to appoint federal judges, district judges, Supreme Court judges, justices, whatever. So it's kind of hard to expect them to do the right thing when them being appointed in this fantastic paying position of power and power depends on them doing the wrong thing. It's hard to have faith that the right thing will occur. But this is one of those things that's like so in your face simple. You can't even lie your way out of it to say it meant like, no, it still needs to belong being started in the Senate. Something like, there's no argument whatsoever. The only thing that we can hope for is that the Supreme Court will take this case. Matter of fact, I don't know if that was a Supreme Court case that he's filed or just in a federal court. But what if the courts simply say, we don't want to look at the case. We're not gonna deal with it. We don't want to look at the case. Well, if that's the case, then the only thing that you can do is not pay the tax for Obamacare. And when the IRS goes after you, you fight it in court. And then you have no choice but to fight it in court. And then the court's going to have to rule at that point by force. Not because they want to, but by force because you are basically fighting the IRS at that point. And you will get to go to court. And the court will then have to decide, is it constitutional? Because if Obamacare is unconstitutional, and they rule it right then and there, then that means the IRS action against you trying to collect money is null and void, because the law itself that gave them the power to come after you is null and void. So even if they are unwilling to listen to the case, or they throw it out or whatever, there's always that second opportunity individually to fight it in the courts. Because if they are taking revenue from your paycheck by force through the IRS, when you do your taxes, you simply put in there that, you know, I'm not paying that tax, so here's what I get back. And then if the IRS says, well, sorry about your luck, we're taking it anyways, you can then file a lawsuit against the IRS, and that will be your case. The law is null and void. Here's why it's null and void. Therefore, the IRS action to take it out of my check's null and void. Where do we go with this? And a judge is going to have to rule on that. They're not going to be able to say, well, we're just going to throw the case out. I mean, they can't. They have to rule on it at that point, you know, in my opinion. So, I can't wait to see where this goes. Cannot wait to see where this goes. And all we can do is hope. Which I don't have much faith in hope. You know me and hope. I don't smoke opium. But I may have to smoke a tiny bit of low-grade hopium, in this case, to hope that I hope that this case goes through and immediately we find out, oh, it's null and void. Have a nice day. Plain and simple. So we will see, because I don't think that, well, it's going to probably be 2015 before you get the taxes taken out of your check. because the whole, if this just basically started for 2014, that means the IRS, Obamacare, all that, when it comes tax time next year, do your tax returns. That's when they'll figure out what you owe for Obamacare. So we do have some time to see where this goes. And I would love nothing more than for this pile of crap, Obamacare, to go down in a burning, flaming mess, which will make all these politicians look like a bunch of baboons, which they are. And I don't think there will be any way at that point that they'll be able to get together again and try to dupe the American people again and say we've got a new bill, and have old Nancy Pelosi stand up and say once again, hey, trust us, we'll tell you what's in the bill later, we're gonna vote on it now. It's kind of like a surprise later. Surprise part 2. I know you like the first surprise, here's second surprise. I don't think there's a chance in hell that they will even attempt to try that. If they were to do that and just flat out write that bill up, fine, we'll start it in the House. It's a tax revenue bill. It's not even called Obamacare, it's called something else. Shove it down their throats, goes to the Senate, passes it, Obama signs into law. I think that would be a big enough move if they did that again, and that brazen, because they had to lie to everybody. They had to lie to everybody to make you think that this was a good health care bill. And now everyone's recognizing it's not, finally. So if they try to do some other big piece of legislation and cram it down our throats, pass it into law, I don't think there's a chance in hell that the American people will stand by the old party line thing. Well, I'm a Democrat, I gotta vote Democrat. Well, I'm a Republican, I'm voting for the Republican. I think at that point people are going to look around and say, who the hell's up for office? Who's trying to become a senator or congressman? Do they have any history in being one? No, that's who I'm voting for. If yes, get the hell out of here, I'm not voting for you. And then we have the other problem of rigged elections and electronic voting machines that put people like Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi right back in office, which is astounding. It's the best democracy money can buy. Because in a democracy, you don't have presidents or anybody electing their own people, also known as appointing key positions. You don't have the executive branch appointing someone in the judicial branch, such as the Supreme Court, who would rule on everything important that you did or did that was, unconstitutional, because they're going to rule in your favor because you appointed them into this awesome position. And then the lower courts, the federal courts, lower than the Constitution, also get appointments by the president. That's not how democracy works. So what we have here in America and in other countries that call themselves democracies is the same thing. And this is what is known as an oligarchy, where it's just a guy, kind of like a guy and a bunch of his pals running the show. And when you have that guy appointing his pals who say, yep, everything he just did is constitutional. Oh, Supreme Court judge or justice the other day, district judge yesterday. Well, I read it yesterday, but it happened a couple days ago. Unconstitutional zones are 100 miles inland of the border. Don't expect any constitutional rights within 100 miles of a border, national border. And you would sit there in awe saying, what? That's not, you can't even rule on that, that's so absurd. And he just did. I'll take it to the appeals court, appellate court, here I come. Mr. Judge who, what's your name? Oh, let me look on my phone real quick. Oh, he was appointed by one of our past presidents. Uh-oh. Wonder how he's gonna rule in my favor, in the country's favor. Not happening. This is precisely the reason why revolutions have happened in the past. In the history books, they've tried to change the history and make it very broad. The people are unhappy with such and such and they're revolted and that's it. They don't go into the details of really why. Sometimes you can find some history like that, but it's very rare. And it'll tell you the precise reason why people revolted. This is the precise reason. When there's no more rule of law and you have dictators running the show, appointing their people, making the laws, telling you that your Constitution, what that means, is not what it means, even though it's freaking child could read it and understand what it meant, and they're going to tell you that's not what that means. There's no other choice. There's no other choice. And I sat here all these years saying, man, I hope that doesn't have to happen. Man, I hope we can get out of this a different way. Knowing in my head, this is history. We have history repeating. History always repeats. So if it always repeats, there has to be some kind of revolution in this country. Therefore, that's what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Take care.